Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So as you know, we had started political theory series and we have completed justice, rights, liberty, democracy and equality. So today I'm going to teach you idea of duty. So let's get started. Now we will see the contents. First intro, then significance of duty, then meaning, then duties and rights in the conservative perspective, duties and rights in the communitarian perspective, duties and rights in the Gandhian perspective, then types of duty. So, rights discourse has been one of the most prominent features of contemporary political philosophy and political agendas. It argues that persons, mainly as individuals, are the bearers of a body of claims, liberties, and powers which the rest of the society has to acknowledge, and public life should be based on such acknowledgement and support. Now, significance of duty. It has been argued by several scholars that the rights discourse focuses much more and often exclusively on individuals without drawing attention to cultures and communities which enable people to be claimants and bearers of such rights. This stream of thought stresses on duties and obligations to sustain culture and communities, without which it would be impossible for people to make claims on and sustain a regime of rights. Sometimes denial of certain rights may make people rise in revolt against a system which is by and large fair. Discourse on duty has drawn attention to the need to preserve a system which is overall fair, and one cannot rebel against such an order. See, thinkers like Mahatma Gandhi have felt that the rights discourse has been fed into the service of an unending chain of satisfactions and gratifications, and this discourse has not been sensitive to authentically human pursuits. Okay, it has led to wanton exploitation of earth resources, breeding conflicts and violence closely bound up with such an endeavour. They have drawn attention to the need to foreground a conception of the human person and moral duties if we have to sustain civilized ways of life. So at the same time, we cannot ignore that fascist and authoritarian orders have stressed on the duty to contend against liberal stress on rights and the Marxist pursuit of an non-exploitative and just social order. Now next, meaning. A duty generally prescribes what we ought to do and what we ought not to. It is a reason for action. Duty specifies the terms that are binding on individuals and groups in their social practices. It has been suggested that our conscious practices can be seen as motivated by right-based, duty-based or goal-based perspectives. While our practices might be governed by all these perspectives, one of them might be fundamental. A duty-based perspective appeals to duty and the reasons embedded therein to uphold and justify our practices. Now, our next topic is duties and rights. See, duties are closely associated with rights in liberal thought. The nature and degree of this association, however, has greatly differed in pre-liberal societies where persons were caught in social roles and people were not free to pursue their choices. Duties ordered their lives. Liberal transportation led to stress on rights, and duties were seen as correlated to rights. If a person possessed rights, then others, be it individuals, groups, or the state as the case may be, were invested with a determinate set of duties to protect and promote those rights. Now let's discuss about distinct spaces of duties and rights within liberal thought. So first one is interest theory. See, this theory was initially stated by Jeremy Bentham, who saw rights not as natural or moral, but as products of law. He argued that the law, by creating duties, stipulates rights. He said, it makes me liable to punishment in case of my doing any of those acts which would have the effects of disturbing you in the exercise of that right. There is no right if there is no corresponding duty sanctioned by law. This understanding of the relation is sometimes called as sanction theory. Okay, our next theory is choice theory. The choice or will theory counterposes itself against the interest theory, stipulating the relation between rights and duties. One of the important proponents of this theory is H.L.A. Hart. He is suggested that a right is a form of choice. The essential feature of a right is that the person to whom the duty is owed is able to control the performance of that duty. The duty-right relation is a chain which binds one individual, the bearer of the duty, and whose other end is in the hands of another individual, the bearer of the right, to use it according to his will. It could budget the following relation. First, the right holder may waive or extinguish the duty or leave it in existence. Second, after a breach or threatened breach of a duty, the right holder may leave the duty unforced or may reinforce it by suing for compensation. The right holder may waive or extinguish the obligation to pay compensation resulting from the breach of duty. The choice theory invokes duties primarily with reference to rights, but the space of duty need not be marked by reference to rights only. Duty acts need not always correlate to right acts. Further, several rights may not have corresponding duties. Next, justice. As you know, we had already discussed about justice theory, which was related to John Rawls. John Rawls proposes a set of principles to inform a just society, which he argues all reasonable people will concur. These principles establish a fair and equal basis for collective life expressed in terms of rights. These principles of justice led to two sorts of principles: principle for institutions, which apply to the basic structure of society, and principles for individuals, which set the duties and obligations of persons with respect to institutions and one another. Citizens are duty bound to support just institutions as they themselves concur to them. Now our next topic is duties and rights in the conservative perspective. See, conservatives stress on duties and the ground they adduce for the same very market. Their mainstream arguments, however, are clear. Social institutions and modes are formed through the efforts of several preceding generations. The thoughts and efforts of generation have gone into the making of these institutions and modes. Such endeavors have often resulted in separating the chaff from the grain, retaining only those elements which can be retained. So guys, it is very important that every generation be inserted into the culture, modes and institutions of society, rather than every individual think that he has the right to choose culture, modes and institutions of his choice. Traditions and legacies assign to people definite tasks and responsibilities to be fulfilled. By performing such tasks and responsibilities, one furthers the purposes of institutions, enabling new generation to be inserted into the collective life of societies. See, conservative perspectives often urge members of society to look at its institutions and ways of life with respect, rather than through critical scrutiny. The performance of one's duty acquires greater purposefulness and satisfaction if such a perspective internalized by the concerned social agent. Okay, next, communitarian perspective. While the idea of autonomy is deeply influenced by Kant, communitarians are influenced by certain ideas underscored by Aristotle and Hegel. Communitarians argue that right-based theories ignored the fact that our capacity to conceive and exercise rights and pursue autonomy can only develop in society, in and through relations and interaction with others. So, the communitarians therefore reject the notion of primacy of rights, the moral stand that individual rights have primacy over duties, virtue or collective good. They stress on duties and duty to sustain institutions which can promote virtue and collective good. See, communitarians argue that even if rights are upheld, they will not enjoy respect if people are not bound together by shared conceptions and ways of life sustained by duty. It is through duties that we not merely reach out to others, but also sustain an appropriate milieu for the exercise of rights. There are different types of communitarians. All of them do not necessarily reject the significance of rights. However, they all argue that duties are significant not merely in relation to rights, but in protecting and promoting common good. Now, duties and rights in the Gandhian perspective. M.K. Gandhi is well known for his stress on duties and his identification of dharma as the path of duty. He also upheld the values of Swaraj. That means self-rule. Such a fusion of dharma and Swaraj, or duty and freedom, is a characteristic mark of Gandhian thought. Gandhi argues that all men and women are equal. The doctrine of Advaita upholds it. If I am that, and besides that there is none else. Being characteristic of Advaita, every being has to be regarded as supreme. The same principle dwells in each and every one of us. By realizing this principle in us, we will be able to wholly determine our lives. See, Swaraj for Gandhi is a pursuit within the reach of everyone. It involves the duty of self-discipline and a transformation on that basis. It is the rule of the mind over passions. Self-rule enables one to pursue earth and karma within the bounds of dharma. See, Gandhi related the concept of Swaraj and Dharma to his other concepts such as non-attachment and non-violence. One sets oneself free towards self-realization and self-rule through non-attachment to material possessions and belongings and by being free from the entanglements of desires and passions. The autonomy that Gandhi envisaged was not on the basis of the availability of abundant material resources, but on the basis of conscious control, regulation, and denial of such resources. Now, types of duties. Often a distinction is made between negative duties and positive duties. While the former requires other people to merely refrain from acting in certain ways, to do nothing that violates the related rights, the second requires that people act positively to do something. The first calls for refraining from action or non-interference, while the latter calls for action or intervention. However, such a distinction is far too native. Often the so-called negative duties call for extensive positive action. For instance, the right to security does not merely call for abstinence from injury or assault, but involves contributions in terms of taxes and public supports to maintain an extensive system of public security. Sometimes the so-called positive duties might be embroidered in a complex set of abstentions and interventions. Okay, so we have to distinguish between the duty not to violate a right and the duty to prevent violation of rights. Okay, for instance, duty not to assault others is not the same as the duty to prevent a third person from assaulting someone when one could protect the victim from such an attack. The first is for greater import than the second. There is no one-to-one pairing between kinds of duties and kinds of rights. The fulfillment of rights may call for multiple kinds of duties. Okay. So, for every basic right, three types of duties are suggested. First, duties to avoid depriving. Second, duties to protect from deprivation. Third, duties to aid to deprived. For example, with regard to personal security, everyone has the duty not to endanger a person's security, to protect people against deprivation of their security by other people, to provide for the security of those unable to provide for their own. See, as the scope of duty gets markedly varied as we move beyond their immediate correspondence to rights, there are rights which are not immediately tied up with duties. There are four kinds of rights that are generally spoken of. First, claim rights. They are the demands that one party has upon another. In such instances, while A has a right, B has a reciprocal duty. Those who argue for the mutualities of rights and duties often restrict rights to claim rights. For example, workers have claim rights on their wages. Their employers have a duty to pay them wages mutually agreed upon. Second, liberty rights. Often they are simply called as liberties. They do not immediately suggest duties. For example, my right to wear a dress does not invoke a corresponding duty from others in an immediate sense. Third one is powers. See, laws and customs invest certain distinct capacities on people which might be possessed by all, such as the right to vote, or confined to a select few, such as the power to adjudicate invested in the judges. Such powers do not necessarily have corresponding duties. Fourth one is immunities. Immunities are counterposed to powers and therefore are protections against the reach of powers. For instance, the power or conscription may be vested in some authorities in a state, but immunity provides safety valves against such power. Again, they are not correlated with a set of duties. Liberties, powers, and immunities do not have correlated duties, marking an enlarged space for rights. Okay. So guys, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any doubt, feel free to ask your questions. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel for more videos. Thank you so much guys for watching my video. See you in the next video. Till then, bye bye. Take care.